So I'll say a couple of words on Hanukkah, okay, and just a lot of things you could say and so on. But the central idea of what Hanukkah really is. What exactly? What are we looking at? What are we trying to remember? And what are Chazal trying to teach us from the whole mitzvah of Hanukkah? The truth is, when we look at Hanukkah, the biggest question, really, in a sense, there's a lot of questions, but one of the biggest questions is why in the Hellenism there's no mention of the nace of the lights, of the menorah, of the oil. The only mention is of the military victories. And the Hellenism doesn't say a thing about just recovery Shimon. It just doesn't really say much about the true nace of Chanukah, which is what we really indicate. The whole concept of the Chanukah lech, the lights, and the nace that you had 8 days of oil on a 1-day supply, 8 days of the candles, the menorah burned for 8 days on a supply of 1 day. And that's, of course, is a ness. That's a physical ness. And since the main concept of Hanukkah is the concept of Besumanisa, really the question is, why doesn't Hellenism mention that at all? I'm sure I'm not the first one to ask that question. And I'm not sure what other people say about that and so on. But that's obviously a tremendous contradiction about what Hanukkah is and so on. So what we're trying to understand is what was so important about the event of Hanukkah that Chazal, the sages, say that we needed to make a special, almost like a yom tov in a sense, to commemorate this type of event and to learn from the event and so on. When you look at human history, okay, we see many things happening, okay, many things. We see different peoples, different nations, different interactions of nations, wars, and a lot of things going on and so on. But the question is, what's really going on in terms of ruchnius, in terms of the inner dimensions of the world? What changes over there as human history kind of progresses? And the answer is something that very few people really realize or understand. And it's the relationship, basically, between ruchnius and gashmius. Most people think that the Rebbe made ruchnius, okay? He made the spiritual world. He made gashmius, or the physical world, okay? And he created both of these worlds, and we kind of exist in both. But the two worlds, ruchnius and gashmius, are static, means their relationship remains basically the same, from the beginning to the end, from the beginning of the creation of the world to the end of time, which is when the Mashiach arrives and we start to look at what's called Olam Haba. But the truth is that's not true at all. And a tremendous amount of our ability to understand what happens in world history has to do with the continuously changing interaction between ruchnius and gashmius. Now, what am I really talking about? And I just think that very, very few people really understand that ruchnius and gashmius are two places or two systems that interact in what's called a dynamic way, where their interaction changes over time. And because it changes over time, the way we see existence itself changes. And Hanukkah has to do with that on some level, where Chazal suddenly saw a new relationship between ruchnius and gashmius, between the spiritual world and the physical world. And they realized that this new relationship that would exist between the two will be here to stay until the end of history. What exactly is the relationship between the two? And I'm not sure, I think I spoke about this when I was speaking, because then I don't think anyone remembers in terms of that song. But fundamentally, Ruchnius and Gashmius, okay, have related to each other in three separate ways, three what's called major ways that they've changed throughout history. The first interaction of the two is the time of Adam Rishon before the sin. Ruchnius and Gashmius, what exactly is what is Ruchnius and Gashmius? And it's a big shock in a certain sense. Olam Haba is a world, what's called Olam HaNitzchi. It's a world which is eternal. What does that mean, it's eternal? It doesn't mean it's a world that lasts forever. What it means is that there's a world or a situation, a matzav, or a situation where there is no time, where existence is not measured in time. We cannot comprehend this, but it means that we exist in a way where there's no past, there's no present, and there's no future. The gradations of time that we see do not exist in Olam Haba. There's no such thing as the past or the future and so on. That's what Olam Haba is, which means that it's a situation which is beyond anything that we have experienced or can experience. Olam Hazeh, which is the world we live in, is a world which is fundamentally governed or dominated by time, past, present, and future, and space. Space means that there's a separation between things and entities. Olam Haba do not have the parameters, these ideas of time and space at all. What is it like? That's a long schmooze. I mean, we'd have to really look into a whole different thing and so on. Understand something about what's called the invariant or unchangeable nature of existence itself. But basically, Ruchnius and Gashmius have nothing to do with Olam Haba. It's a shocking concept. That Olam Haba is not Gashmius, of course. It's not Ruchnius. Why is that? How do we know that? Or rather, how am I understanding this? Because both Ruchnius and Gashmius, both of these worlds, are worlds that are connected to time. Ruchnius also has time, past, present, and future, right? A person passes away, we say he goes to Ruchnius, he can come back down, whatever the story is. Even in Ruchnius, you have a concept where Gehenna is for 11 months. And fundamentally, there's a past and there's a present. It means there's a concept of time in Ruchnius, in the world of Ruchnius, where something isn't and then it became. There are changes that take place. If you have anything to do with change, then you have to do with time. Time really is the ability of existence to change. That's what it means. Time is change. Time in and of itself, there's no such real entity called time. But what time really is the notion that somehow the way you exist has the ability to change so that you exist in a different way. And that change means you're going from a before to an after. If you're going to a before and after, well, that's a change. That's time. Before is called past, after is called what? Present, and that which is to be is called future. So this notion of change creates something called a dynamic concept, which is something which is movable. Olam Haba is not movable. It doesn't move. It's static. Existence doesn't change. It's always the same. In Olam Haba, there's no such thing as before and after. It is what it is, and that's it. Therefore, there's no real feeling of time in that sense at all. But because Ruchnius and Gashmius have to do with time, okay, they have to do with change and so on, obviously they're not part of Olam Haba, which is very difficult for most people to understand. Most people think, okay, is that when a person passes away, okay, then people think that he actually goes to Olam Haba, which of course he doesn't. He either goes to Gan Eden, which is a form of Ruchnius, a spirituality, well, or Gehenna or something. But when a person goes to Gan Eden and so on, people think sometimes that that's Olam Haba. There's nothing to do with Olam Haba. All the people in Gan Eden are waiting for one thing. All those souls that exist in Olam Haba, in Gan Eden, which is in the spiritual world, they're waiting. Does anyone have an idea what they're waiting for?
Olam Haba.
Well, yes, but not critically. All of them, they're all waiting. And when suddenly there's a horn that's blown in the world of Ruchnius, announcing something, the excitement is incredible in Gan Eden. Incredible. What are they waiting for? They're not waiting for, does anyone, what are they waiting up there in Gan Eden? What's that? Why are they waiting for Mashiach? No. What are they imminently awaiting? What they're waiting for, is the ability to come back to the world of Gashmias. That's what they're waiting, to come back into their bodies. They're waiting for Tchias HaMesim, or what's called the resurrection of the dead. That's what they're waiting for. Does anyone have any idea why they're waiting for this? Really? Why are they waiting for Tchias HaMesim to come back to their bodies? Why are they waiting for that? Most people think that Tchias HaMesim means that people will no longer die, which is true. But that's not the power of Tchias HaMesim. The power of Tchias HaMesim is not that people will no longer die. That happens to be something that occurs. But that's not its godless. That's not the greatness of Tchias HaMesim. We all say Mechai HaMesim. What is it? What we say to B'nai Shem that we're looking forward, for the resurrection of the dead. When we're looking forward, it's not only us, but every neshama in the Shemayim, every soul is waiting to come back to his body and renew himself. Why is everyone waiting for this? We all say the bracha over there. What are we talking about? Simple question. No real answer. Well, at least not yet. But
it gives more reality to their existence.
What it is, and this is critical, it's that Ruchnis and Gashmias suddenly come together. There is no world of Ruchnis anymore that's disconnected from Gashmias, and no physical world that's disconnected from Ruchnis. They both return to the same kind of interaction that they had by Adam Rishon before he sinned, where the neshama and the guf were fundamentally merged, they were connected. Like I have two fingers where I take a finger here. This is, let's say, Ruchnius, spirituality. This is Gashmius, or physicality. And this is what it looked like, if you'll notice. Both of them are separated, yet there's a central core where they're both equal. They're the same. This is the true position of Ruchnius and Gashmius. After the sin of Adam Rishon, this is what happened. Two separate worlds. When these two worlds of Ruchnius and Gashmias separated, they became oilamos, or worlds. Before the sin of Adam Rishon, Ruchni and Gashmias were not really worlds, not truly. There was no such thing as Gan Eden, right? And there was no such thing as any of these things. Why do I say that? There was none of these things. There were no organizations, I hate to use the word, but there was no institutions in Gan Eden, like Yeshiva Shemala. It didn't exist, you see. Why do I say that? Because fundamentally you need to understand, and this, I've kind of said this when I was here, but it's extremely important to really understand. If you don't understand this, you're missing fundamentally who you are and where we're all going. Fundamentally, what it is that there are two realities. One is called Ruchnius and one is called Gashmias. But they're not worlds. They're really lenses, like a glass lens. If you look through a lens, you see certain things, okay? If I have glasses on and I have two lenses, one is colored blue and let's say one is colored green, each lens shows me a different color. So they look different in sense, in that way. But the glasses that a person wears is not the person. It's not his eyes. His eyes, which is connected to his head, is the person, okay? Transcends, it goes beyond what lenses. Ruchnis and Gashmias are simple lenses. What they do is when I'm looking at them, they show me an olam or world that looks a certain way. What is the name of the Ruchnistic lens that shows me the color blue? It's called an neshama. A neshama, which we call a soul, is a lens. Okay? The neshama is a lens, or it's a container or a vessel of some sort that holds the person. But the person is not his neshama. Now really, the guf is another lens that holds the person, and the person is not his guf. He's really what? He is a person or a sense of what? Let's try and get some idea without going too deep into this. A person is really a certain entity called a self, which we have never seen. It's amazing. Everyone sitting at this table is a self, yet you have no idea what you are. You see, if I tell a person, I said, look, I want you to take off your suit jacket, your suit, let's say he has a coat, or let's say he has a suit. I say, take off, are you your suit? And he says, no, I'm not my suit. Good, take off your suit. He takes off a suit. Then I say to him, well, what are you now? You're your shirt and your pants? You're not that. Take off your shirt and pants. I'm sorry about the sneistic issue here. My apologies, but I'm trying to get you. Don't do it. So he takes off his shirt and pants, and he's got left with underwear. And then I say to him, well, what are you? Are your underwear there? No, I'm not my underwear. So in other words, take off your underwear. So in other words, fundamentally, we're looking at what's called levushim, where they say what's called a hislapshus, where a person is not his guf, okay? He's not his neshama. So technically speaking, if I want to take anyone, if I want to get to you, really, okay, what I would first have to do is take your guf away. That's number one. Then what are you left with? You're left with a neshama. Then I say, well, are you your neshama? No, you're not. So I have to take away your neshama. And then when I took away both of them, I'm left with you. Now what is that? Okay. It's just amazing that we are all these things and we have no concept of what that is. You are a being, an entity, a being that has self-awareness. It's pure consciousness. It's what it is. That's all you are. You are a being that is a self that has something called self-awareness. You are aware of yourself. And that's an entity. That's what you are.
What is that?
That's it. What is that? Very good question. One day we'll all find out. Olam Haba is a place where you go as a self. You don't take your guf with you. You don't take your neshama with you. What do you go? You go as you are, a self. It means it's an entity of some sort that has total self-awareness. That's it. What does that look like? I haven't the slightest idea in any sense, in that kind of sense. But it's a self. And that's you. We can use terms in some nice scientific ones, call like an ego, but it's not. It's just simply, it's the self that is aware of itself. I am. That's what you say. And you're an entity that has the ability to say I am, and through that ability you exist. You exist by saying I am. You see, and that's really that's Olam Haba. The problem is, in getting to Olam Haba, you got a real big problem called Nam Ksufa, which is a problem in self. You see it. Self is what you are. You are an act of self-awareness all the time. And that is the way you exist. That creates a problem of Nam Ksufa. Now, my goal really was not necessarily to go into this concept of Nam Ksufa as such. What is that problem? But in order to solve the problem, the Rebbe Shem said very simply, you've got to, in that state, the Rebbe Shem simply says, you feel very disempowered in that state. Why is that? Because there's a part of you that's mamash an eloki. You know, kind of moving off to a different direction here.
Kessin, so aren't you your neshama?
No.
You're not your neshama?
No, you're not.
What's chelek elokam? What is that?
Okay. You're not. You are not your neshama. You are not your guf. What are you?
If I understand.
You are chelek elokam. What does that actually mean? Okay, and I'm not going to kind of move into that because I really didn't want to go into this thing. The difference. Okay, I'm just going to run it and do the best you can. You are a symptom of a being called the Ein Sof. Now the Ein Sof is not the Rebbe Shem. It's not. The Ein Sof is something also which is here, which comes from the Baruch Shem, who precedes it. And the Ein Sof itself, okay, the distinguishing quality of an Ein Sof is two things. Number one, it's Ein Sof. It means that it has no border. Border means there's nothing that can distinguish it. In order for me to say this, like if I look at this fork and I say this, okay, the word this points to a fork, this. But the word this points to something specific. Something specific means it has a border. It could be identified, right? Let's say it's made of plastic. It has a couple of hooks over here. It's used to plunge the thing into food and pick it up. This is a this. It's an entity and so on. It has a certain definition. We understand what a fork is and so on. The Ein Sof is really, in a certain sense, like a self that's conscious, but there's no border to it. What that means is that you can't use the word this. We have no comprehension what something is like without a border. Everything we know, existence as we know it, always exists within a border, within a certain, what's called a context, or a definition or something. The Ein Sof has no definition. It has no features. It has no characteristics. There's nothing in it that I can point to and say this, and so on. So the Ein Sof fundamentally, but so that's the first thing. So the Ein Sof is an entity that has no border, but it has another thing about it which is very interesting, in which why it's there, in a sense, why the Baruch Shem, in his true being called Atzmusai, developed it, however he developed that. It's able to suddenly take a part of itself and give it a border. That's right. It took a part of itself in some incredibly mysterious way that we cannot comprehend because we have no way to comprehend what the thing is. And suddenly, it moved away from itself in a sense, and part of itself suddenly took on an actual border. So it's like an entity of self that's bordered. It knows itself through what's called self-awareness. Self-awareness is an idea that we can understand, the knowledge of self. So suddenly the Ein Sof took on a certain knowledge of itself and suddenly took on a border. So it's an Ein Sof that now has a border. What is that? Who is that? That's us. We are a bordered Ein Sof. That's what we are. That's what Tzimtzum is. Tzimtzum means that the Ein Sof, this entity without border, was able to suddenly do something which we see as something called Tzimtzum. But you have to understand, Tzimtzum itself is an idea which we understand, okay? It's some form of an abridgment of some sort. That's in a border. So we have no idea how an Ein Sof moves to suddenly give itself a border. Because before that border, it's incomprehensible. So when it can't even go there. We are a bordered Ein Sof, which means that you are an Ein Sof. You're simply...
Every person has
Is it the goof shabim?
No.
Is it the goof or the neshama shabim? Or the telekilometer shabim?
Excuse me.
No.
It's none. It's an Elokah. When you say the word Elokah, which is a divine being, in that sense, the part of you that's an Elokah is the Ein Sof. The part of you that's what? That's not the Ein Sof, it's called a Chelek. So you're a Chelek Elokah Mimar Atzmusai. 3 levels. So you are an Ein Sof with a border. Mazel tov.
Why are all the cells different then? They all come from the same source. They're all pieces.
Yeah, I don't want to go.
Okay.
Again, I don't want to really go into this because we're going to start to go into much of this and that. So, but that's the thing. So what happened exactly? What exactly happened?
I don't hate Russia.
Nam Niksufa is a fundamental problem. Nam Niksufa is a problem in that there is a certain contradiction between the Elokah of you, which has no border, okay, and the Chelek of you, which has a border. It's between the bordered and unbordered elements of who you are. And when the two come together, there's a very powerful feeling, a disempowerment. You feel a tremendous chalisha, which is called a busha. But it's just a feeling of disempowerment between two different natures that came together. You see what I'm saying? And that's the problem. The problem is that when you have a border, suddenly something new happens with a border. When you have a border, okay, it means that a new kind of construction exists. What is that? It's called an inside and an outside. An inside is you, the inside. Outside is not you, whatever that means. So there's something called me and there's something called not me. The only reason why you can feel there's me and then there's not me, whatever's not me, is because you have a gavul or you have a border. So what a border did to you, okay, basically, is it gave you a feeling that the me part is inside, that's my inside, as opposed to the not me part, which is outside. What is the not me? You don't know. All you know is you sense that there's something about existence that's not you. That's a chalisha. The Ein Sof has no such problem. It has no outside and no inside because it has no border. So it's all existence. The statement Einoi Milvado applies to the Ein Sof. Why? Because it's not that there's nothing outside. It's not that there's nothing outside of it. There's nothing besides it. It has no outside. It is everything. It is existence itself. There's no outside. There's no inside. It is everything that's possible. It is existence itself. But as soon as I give you a border, you're in trouble. What's the trouble? Suddenly, you have a feeling that, you know something, I'm not everything that exists. I'm not. And the part of you which is Eloki is disturbed. Because the true nature of Eloki is there is no outside. But because I have a gavul or boundary, which is called me, I feel me, not me. That's nam l'ksufa. Big problem. That's why it can't be avoided. You want to say, why did the Baruch Shem create someone without nam l'ksufa? Well, the problem is as soon as you have tzimtzum, you have nam l'ksufa. One comes from the other. The point, and here's the thing. What is the problem with that? What is the problem? The problem is that it's a disturbance in who you are. As long as you feel that there's an outside, okay, you're going to have a problem in Olam Haba. You will. Because the real shlemus of feeling an Eloki is not there anymore.
Why is it a busha though? I mean, maybe it's a...
The word busha, which means...
It sounds like what's the busha?
That's why I said the word busha normally means shame. I don't know if you know what shame is psychologically. Shame is a feeling that you have when you feel that there's something wrong with you, as opposed to guilt, which is there's something wrong with what you did. Shame is that there's something wrong with me, I'm defective. That's shame. In the case of self, at the highest level, that's called basically a disempowerment. I don't use the word shame. Shame is already a feeling you're having when you're in your guf. But in its most abstract form, you feel disempowered. It's like your koiches are suddenly are compromised in some way. And it is compromised. You know, you take an Ein Sof and you give it a gavul. That's compromise. Serious compromise. And that's what Nam L'Ksuf is.
But does it have to be this way? Meaning...
If you're going to matzam from something which has no gavul into something which has a gavul, it does come out this way.
Why not just call it
That's
bush?
the way feelings work.
The word bush is the closest you can get to the word. The word bush is because I guess it's a Tanoic state actually. It's called the Namak Sufa. It means bread of shame. It means the closest we can feel it is that when we suddenly have something or get something that we really don't deserve, we did nothing to earn it, and it was simply given to us. There's a certain feeling of lack of power. The word power is very important. Power means existence. If I'm powerful, I control existence. If I'm not powerful, I don't control it. In the end, because the Ein Sof is all existence, it's the single most powerful thing that there is. It's everything. It is existence. There's nothing more powerful than that. Well, there is. The Banisham Atzmusa beyond that. But besides that, it's the most powerful thing. Here it comes along, takes a piece of itself, if I may say, and makes what's called a zulosoi, what we call a zulosoi, something that has a boundary. That boundary thing, that boundary being called self, has big problems in the way it's aware and so on. But okay, we're not going to go into
What
fully.
happens to them? You clash with
So,
This state of being right after Tzimtzum is Olam Haba. It is Olam Haba. The nature, the Zulosoi, or the being, the self that's created by Tzimtzum is really Olam Haba. what is Olam Haba really? And this is a very subtle concept. Olam Haba fundamentally is a certain state of existence. It's very hard to imagine that. We can imagine change, right? Like, for example, let's say this fork is here, and now I move it here, right? Nothing happened to the fork, except the position changed. So I say, things can change their position, right? Things can change in other ways. The way you look, you get older, you look different, you gain weight, get gray, you change, you see. Things change in our mind. We know more, we know less. Things can change, but the fact that we exist never changes. It's just the fact that we are. That doesn't change. We are, and that's it. And we always are the same way. Our guf may change, certain things changes, but the fact that we are is there, you see, and so on. That doesn't change. The shocking thing is that also can change. You see, and this is the problem. The problem is that being itself or existence, which is very abstract, itself can change. There can be different ways that happens. And I'm not going to go into this. It's a very difficult study, the concept of how being itself changes. But this is the point. Namak Sufa is Olam Haba. It's you at the highest level. The problem is that the highest level has got some real problems to it. You feel disempowered because you sense that you are not all existence. Why? Because you have a border. So there's something that belongs to you and something that doesn't. Do you understand what I'm saying? So what has to happen is you've got to get rid of that. You can't get rid of the border. That's impossible. If you got rid of your border, do you know what would happen to you? If you were able to remove your border, what would you be then?
You lose yourself.
What? You'd be Ein Sof.
You lose yourself.
You'd lose, right. The border is the chelek is what's made the Elokah, different from an Ein Sof. It's that border that distinguishes you. You can't get rid of it. You see what? But what you have to do is in some way dilute it. You have to dilute that thing and so on in some way so it doesn't feel disempowered. Now, is that possible? Okay, now we come on to real serious issues about the concept of change and so on. Olam Haba is that state. It's a state right after fundamentally where you are what? Where you are in a, you have a border, but without Namlik Sufa. Once you've removed that disempowerment feeling, okay, you've got a border in a way, okay, but it doesn't make you feel disempowered anymore. The chelik and the Elokah integrate into a new bria that never existed before.
So why did anyone wait?
That's a true yesh me'ayin. The true yesh me'ayin is what? Is you after you've fixed Namlik Sufa. Because what you are after you fix that problem is something that didn't exist before. You see? And that introduces the whole notion of change and so on. But okay. Now, the Rebbe therefore said, we got to get rid of this. How are we going to get rid of this? How? So the Rebbe said, the problem is what's called a yichud problem. Yichud. I have to create a yichud between you and yourself. So somehow the me and the not me doesn't feel like so powerfully distinct from each other. You see what I'm saying? So what the Rebbe says is, I'm going to now give you an ability to decide your madreg of yichud. This is a very important concept, okay? So I'm telling you a very big chiddush, okay? Some of you will be disturbed, some of you will not. When you remove this feeling of not me as a stira, contradiction to the me, okay, we say you've attained a certain level. There's a tikkun of Namlik Sufa, but we call that tikkun tiferes. Tiferes, or beauty. It means somehow you've rectified yourself and you've established a certain internal yichud between you and your existence. So there's no steer anymore, even with a border. Okay. What is the name of that tiferes? What is the name of suddenly that reconciliation? What is that reconciliation? Where you reconcile the me and the not me, so there's no feeling of a disempowerment. Okay. the name of that, and this is going to be somewhat shocking, the name of that is the Shekhinah. Many people think that the Shekhinah is the Bnei Shalom. It's not true. The Shekhinah is not God. It is not. The Shekhinah is the God that's in you. The part of you that is the Ein Sof. When the Ein Sof is in you, that's called the Shekhinah. When you reconcile yourself with that Eloki in you, you have been mesaken what's called the Golus, the true Golus of the Shekhinah, which is Nam Niksufa. You need to remember something, and this is very important. Olam Haba is not a place where we recognize the Bnei Shalom. It's not. This is a very we don't come closer to the Bnei Shalom as he is. We never do. We have no shaychus there. We have no shaychus to the Ein Sof, which has no gavul. How are we going to have shaychus to that which has nothing to do with gavul at all? It's beyond even that. You never have shaychus to that. The only thing you have shaychus to is the Ein Sof, which is in you. That Ein Sof, which you then can feel as you remove the border problem, if I may call Nam Sufa, is called Shekhinah. You know, when it says Tzadikim Yoshum, V'itosei B'Rosheim, V'nenem Mizir Shekhinah, there's a very deep mystery to that. Tzadikim Yoshum means that what? It means fundamentally that that's called Olam Haba. But there's no movement or change anymore, so we call that Yeshiva. Tzadikim Yoshum. They sit, means they're static. There's no change in them at all. Okay? V'itosei B'Rosheim. Their ator or their crown. What is the crown? Really? The crown is the avodah to reconcile a bordered entity between the me and the not me. And the avodah that they did by unifying those two aspects so that you no longer feel the contradiction of the border, that's called an atorah or a crown. The nene mitzvah shechina is your nene from who? From you. Suddenly you feel the Eloki part of you without the blemish of Nam V'Ksufa. You know where you kind of see this a little bit, and it's hinted. In the Chumash, in the Torah, when suddenly Klal Yisrael builds the Mishkan, right? Why did they build the Mishkan? They built the Mishkan, why? Because of the Chet of the Egel, right? To Masakan. What happens if they didn't do a Chet of the Egel? Would there have been a Mishkan? What? No. Well, wait a minute. You know how much part of the Torah talks about the Mishkan and the mitzvahs that are connected with the Mishkan? Yeah, so then what would have been? So what would have been? Let me tell you something about the Torah itself. It's a very strange book in a certain way. Because the Torah, or the Maisim in the Torah itself, are what's called secondaries. The essence is that we were made in a way where you have to masaken this border issue, okay? And we're supposed to do it in a way which leaves us in a very good place. If we fail to do that, then there's something called an alternative. If that alternative fails, then we go through a second alternative and a third alternative, which means that the Torah is really a narration of the story of alternatives. Okay? That's really what it is. The Torah that we have, okay, is a statement of alternatives. We were never supposed to have the Mishkan, right? We were never supposed to be in the desert for 40 years. Almost everything you see there was never supposed to happen. It was supposed to begin and end with Adam Rishon, and that was it. Anything after Adam Rishon when he sinned is something called an alternative. And then his alternative was Kain and Hava. Their alternative was Noach, the Mabul. Their alternative was the Afloga. Their alternative was Avram and Klal Yisrael. So what we see is the Torah is nothing more than a story of continuous, what's called bid'evidic alternatives that nobody wanted, really. You see what I'm saying? The shaila is, wait a minute, the Torah is the story of all these alternatives, then what really is the Torah, really? So obviously the Torah is in two forms. It's in the form itself of what's called its true depth, which is its tikkun and its establishment of a tikkun, and then all what's called the alternative establishments of that tikkun. I mean, if you really want to count how many alternatives we're into in the year 5775, it's like thousands of alternatives. in that sense. But the first alternative was Adam Rishon and so on. What the Torah says very clearly, if there was no hate to the ego, then what would we have had? Where would the Shekhinah be? Where would the Shekhinah be? What's that?
Everybody.
V'shachanti b'soicham. Then the Shekhinah would be inside of you. Well, what does that mean, inside of me? What is that? Is that God? No. The Buddhism doesn't exist inside of you. Then what is that? That's what the word shachin, to reside. What it is the Shekhinah is the Ein Sof that's in you, okay? Right before it takes on a border. It's the Ein Sofist quality that we all possess. And that's really what we are. It's a shocking thing if you really think of you. Every one of you is an Ein Sof with a border. That's it. It's the simplest definition of what you are. What's called the Chelek Elokah. That's it. And you have to second that disturbance between these two elements. The Shekhinah is the Ein Sof which is in you when it's reconciled with your border, so there's no feeling anymore of a disempowerment or what's called a not me. You suddenly feel, what's that?
Shekhinah that goes from Golos to is there country to country? Is there another Shekhinah in the world?
No, that's it. No. The Shekhinah, you go into Golos and Golos. So the Ein Sof in you goes into Golos, takes on other borders. In essence, it's hard to understand this and so on because everyone is...
What does it mean, Golos came along? When the Yidden went to Bavel, then the Shekhinah came to Bavel. And the Shekhinah is following them, they are when they are.
Shekhinah exists outside of you?
Yeah.
Your Shekhinah exists outside of you?
Is it different levels?
And then comes in? You follow your own
The
Shekhinah?
Shekhinah is the Ein Sof in you when it's reconciled with the border. That is the Elokah. That's what you experience. You establish a yichud in yourself on an incredible level. That's the Shekhinah.
What does it mean, Shekhinah is in Golos by Edom or by any other nation? And it empowers the other nation.
I really don't want to go into that, but that talks about the concept of the Zulosoi, the concept of the Zulosoi when he is split into many, many people. When you have the Zulosoi becomes many people, not one person and so on. So the Ein Sof, which is in all of them, okay, suddenly it means that the Shekhinah in Golos means that the Ein Sof, which is in you, suddenly becomes further and further away from feeling it or hearing it. You become more and more distant from the Eloki in you. That's what it means. What's that?
Physically distant?
No, it's a ruchnistic. Ruchnistic distant from the Eloki in you. But I really don't want to get caught up in this part. Okay.
What's the problem with one mitzvah? It sounds like the problem is bigger than the solution.
No, it's not, because what is that mitzvah? Now you come to the concept of a mitzvah. What exactly is a mitzvah? Really, what is a mitzvah? What is a mitzvah? What does it do for you? How does it work?
Breaks itself, subjugates to the higher self, to the higher being.
Because what it does is, it destroys the concept of not me.
No, it destroys the concept of me.
It's just me.
No, it
The other way.
destroys the concept of the me, not me. That duality is destroyed. How is that destroyed, really, in a sense? Because fundamentally, when you sense that there's something outside of me, I'm not all of existence, you sense, okay, that outside of me is the Bonishon. Who's the outside? There's me and there's the Bonishon, that's it. If I sense there's a not me, then I sense that the Bonishon is outside of me. And if he's outside of me, it means I am outside of him. That is a major problem in terms of your Eloki and your border and so on. The whole thing is the sense that the Bonishon is not outside you, but he is you. Olam Haba can be summarized fundamentally in one sentence. The Bonishon says to you, and it's not easy to get this, there's a contradiction in the sentence. What the Bonishon says to you, or the Ein Sof in this case, okay, says to you, I am you. I am you. But you are not me. I am you. I am. I'm not outside of you. I'm not. It was. You're not outside of me, and because you're not outside of me, I am you. But because you have a border, you sense yourself as separated from me, which is all right, and so on. It is. But that's Olam Haba, is the ability to feel that, a tremendous achdus with your own Ein Sofis element in you, okay, in a sense that you are it, even with a border, and so on. And the way you accomplish that is with a mitzvah. That's how you do it. When you say, when the Bnei Shem says, I'm going to give you a mitzvah and do this, if you do this, then you're saying to me, fundamentally, that I'm you. There's no difference between the two of us. Even though you feel yourself as opposed to me, okay, you also feel me inside of you. That feeling in its highest level is only a feeling in Olam Haba. We cannot truly sense that. But what we can sense, and now we're going to get onto the concept of Ruchdis and Kashmis, is something called an organism. It's called an organismic perception or organismic unity or yichud. What is an organism? That's the question. You see it. What is an organism? So there are two types of relationships. One is called an individual and the other is called an organism. For example, in the human body, you have many different organs. You have the heart, for example, and let's say you have the liver. Whether you realize it or not, those two are separate organs, but they're part of one body. Means they all serve together to bring life to the body. So even though they're separate from each other, they're really completely connected. That's called an organismic relationship. It is so powerful that the body does not recognize, okay, any other organ from another body, because the body says, that's not my organ. That's not part of my organism. Your liver and your heart know each other. They know each other even though they never met. One is on the top of the body, one is in the bottom of the body. They never met as such, but they know each other. They recognize each other as a chavraya, as a kehila of one entity, even though they're all separate. That's called an organismic relationship. Or you can have a relationship where two beings do not recognize each other. They're totally separate. They're individuals, like in this table. Okay, we have a bunch of guys in this table, okay? Do we sense that we're an organism here? No. We sense that we're all here on the night of December, 23rd, listening to a certain shir. But we don't feel connected at all. We don't feel connected. That's a concept of a stranger. In an organism, when everything connects together for one purpose or theme, there are no strangers. Every organ knows every cell in your body, knows every cell in the body. There's no such thing as a stranger in an organism. They all know, even though they're separate, but they all are together in the tachlis called your guf. As opposed to a bunch of individuals in a group like this. You see it. So this is what the Bnei Shem says. The only way you're going to get rid of Nam L'Ksufa is one way. You have to make me and you one. You've got to see me and you as an organism. That you and I are connected in an incredible way. In such a way where we're one being. It's two. You won't feel it totally because you have a border which separates you. But that separation is a minor thing. It will not create a disempowerment. And we're one. Or you can see me and you as totally two separate beings. That's an individual perception. You see. So the Bnei Shem says the following. I'm going to create a situation where you will be tested. You will be tested between a choice of seeing me and you as an organism or me and you as two separate items. Two separate items where you could simply do whatever you want and rebel against me if you want to do that. You see it. That's what the Bnei Shem did. And you will choose. If you choose me and you as a single entity of an organism, if you choose that, okay, then you are ready for Olam Haba, which is when I am you in Olam Haba. If you choose, however, to see me as what? As outside of your border, and I have nothing, I'm outside of you, okay, then that removes your Olam Haba. It leads to what's called Ibud. So that's what the Bnei Shem did. How did he do that? So what he did was, he created two different lenses. One lens, he gave you a pair of glasses, and he said, I'm going to put two different lenses in those glasses. One lens shows me and you connected. We're an organism. You will feel that. When you look through that lens, you will feel me in you. You see, even though you feel yourself distinct from me, but you're going to feel I'm in you. That lens is called an neshama. When the self, which is what you are, looks through the neshama, that's its vessel, that's its suit. When the self, which is what the person is, goes into a vessel called a neshama, it senses the Baruch Shalom in him as an organism. And what I mean, it doesn't sense it through the mind, it feels it, it sees it. It's sensory. We cannot imagine that either, because we don't have that. So the Baruch Shalom gave the person, the neshama, the ability to sense him as an organism with him, without any effort, automatically. As he senses himself, he senses God. Or the Baruch Shalom then gave him another lens in the second eye. In that lens, he feels himself what is called a guf. In that guf, right, when he looks out, he sees everything is separate. We're not connected. I don't feel a connection to any of you. Yeah, I know here that we're connected. We're all Jews, we're Yidden, and so what was the? But I don't sense any connection. You know, you can be a stranger to me as fast as you can be a friend, at all, because there's no sense of real connection. You see it. As I see you, I don't see this kesher. I don't see the kesher is not visible at all. But in your neshama, when you're looking through your neshama, every neshama is niskasha with you. As you see other neshamas, you feel them all connected. It's like you see the wiring. You see wiring. Every neshama sees its wiring to every other neshama. It's like a wiring where you see the wiring. You know what I mean? So the neshama is a certain type of a lens that shows you a certain type of relationship between separate beings. A guf is another kind of lens that sees a different separation. You see, in the end, of course, the Baruch Shalom says, I'm going to give you two lenses. You choose which lens will dominate you, which lens you agree with. And then that lens, okay, both, and then what happens is, let's say, for example, a person chooses the lens of neshama, and he says, yeah, he does mitzvahs and so on. Then what the Baruch Shalom says, now that you've done that, those eyeglasses, something's going to happen to those glasses. What will happen is, where there are two lenses, suddenly, okay, what happens is that one lens completely takes over. So what used to be two lenses becomes one. It's a monocle. Now you're seeing everything through one, which is in the neshama. And then gradually, the lens called the neshama integrates into your awareness, and it disappears. And you are nothing more than a consciousness of complete unity with God, with Hashem. That's called zichus. Zichus is the gradual elimination of what? Of the lenses. The two different ways to see your kesher or your relationship to the Baruch Shalom.
That can happen here?
What's that?
That can happen in El Nado?
No, I mean, no, it's not going to happen so fast. Well, now, what's the problem with that? The problem, that's great. But that's all with Adam Rishon before the sin. Before the Chet, that's what Adam had. Adam Rishon at the same time could see through his neshama and through his guf. There was some kind of a merger. We cannot understand that merger. Obviously, it's incredibly powerful. You mean? So he's able to feel the organism with him, the Baruch Shalom, and at the same time he's able to feel the separation. And he had to try to choose which one does he want to. Does he want to move into the organismic connection or the individual connection? And that was his nesoyan. But he was able to see both or feel both in some way which we cannot comprehend because we don't. But at that stage, Ruchnis and Gashmis were really connected. They're not separate. And they're not Olamas. Ruchnis is not an Olam. Gashmis is not an Olam. The Olam is the eyeglasses with two lenses. Whatever that is. When he did the Chet, what happened was both separated. The Guf and the Neshama separated, and they became two different Olamas. Suddenly, the Olam of organism suddenly took on certain elements of Gashmias, and the Olam of Gashmias took on certain elements of organism. It's what's called an Avuvia, and that's what happened. Never again, they had features of each other and so on, but fundamentally they were separated. And that's what we live with. What's even worse is throughout history, it gets worse. What the Ramchal calls the Tigboris Ara. Tigboris Ara is nothing more than what's called the ascendancy or the godless of Ra. What godless of Ra? How does Ra get worse? What do you mean Ra? How does it get worse? It gets worse when Ruchnis and Gashmias separate further and further. You see it. Then what happens is Gashmi starts to feel real, powerful. Gashmi starts to take on a different feel completely. You see it. And the Ramchal calls that Tigboris Ara, because Gashmis is becoming stronger and Ruchnis is becoming weaker, and so on. So fundamentally, what we see in the Madrega of Adam Yisrael said, okay, he was both. After the Chet, what happened was, he now resided in Gashmis. He fundamentally, his entire consciousness was physical. In other words, he saw existence the way it is now, where everything is separated. Adam Rishon after the Chet no longer saw an organism of anything. What he saw is individuals. Just everything is an individual, everything is separated. You see, so his residence was in the world of separation, or what we call in all fancy multiplicity, where everything is separate. There's multiple items. That's it. No connections. But he could still feel, on some level, the concept of what? Of Ruchnis. He was still closer to Ruchnis. Meaning what? What was that? Nevuah. Adam Rishon suddenly became what's called a Navi, in the sense that, he can in a certain sense know certain things that are going on in a world, in an organismic world, where everything is discussed, everything is connected. But even that he saw in Gashmistic term, which was what? Like visuals. He visually saw the world of Ruchnis. He could never escape. Once he did the Chet, and he confined himself to the world of Gashmias, he could never break out of it again. So even though he's able to connect to Ruchnis, in the sense that he visited, he resided in the world of Gashmias, but he visited the world of Ruchnis. And that's the koyach of Nevuah. So he still had some shaykhs to Nevuah, because Ruchnis was still not that far away yet. You understand? And that's a Navi. A Navi is someone who lives in Olam, who lives in Gashmias, but he can visit Ruchnis. Visit means he can suddenly go into a Tadema, okay, and almost leave his body, but not quite, and suddenly, on some level, begin to have in visual terms the world of Ruchnis.
He's looking through his neshama.
What's that?
He's looking through his neshama.
Yeah. He could look through his neshama. That's why the greater the neshama, the greater the ability to see an organism, the higher he's connected to Ruchnis. Moshe Rabbeinu didn't even have to go into a Tadema. Moshe Rabbeinu was so closely connected to his neshama that he, even though he could actually see what's in his through his neshama, but again, he didn't reside there until he went up to the Shemaim to receive the Torah. Again, once Adam Rishon did the Chet, so the world of Gashmias is the key world, the world of multiplicity. But a Navi could go beyond that. Now you need to understand something about Nevuah. Nevuah was not an unusual event. Okay, the Gemara says that there were over 1 million Nevi'im in the first place on Migdash. Nevuah was a normal part of consciousness, where even though you lived in the world of Gashmias, you can reside in the world, you can visit the world of Ruchnis. You could, still, even though you couldn't come in direct contact anymore. But there had to come a time when even that will be taken away. Even that's taken away. And suddenly, mankind lived in the world of Gashmias and was never again able to visit the world of Ruchnis like Nevuah. When did that happen? When did Ruchnis and Gashmias so far separate that you couldn't even visit the other one anymore? You can still see through it. You have to remember, we still have a neshama. It's still in us. But its koyach connected the guf is so weak that we have, it now represents itself in our seichel. You know, in some way it tells us ideas and thoughts. But we have no nevuah, we have no way of seeing things in Ruchnias or connecting to that emes. You see, what point in history suddenly divided that where we are kula gashmias fundamentally, and we've lost the ability to even visit what used to be our other
Has
lens.
to be Chanukah.
What's that?
Has to be Chanukah.
Purim and Hanukkah. Purim and Hanukkah, right. Purim was the start, you see. When suddenly, all those connections to Ruchnius disappeared. There was no more Nes Nigla. Even the story of Esther, it's all Esther. It looks like a story, it looks like a novel. You know, there's no Nisim in that thing, there's no Nes Nigla. If you see a Nes Nigla, you know, you're looking at Ruchnius. Excuse me, you see something, you know, you see a river split, that's Ruchnius. Because that's complete, it's not Ruchnius in the sense that you see a steer to Gashmius. But you still see, there's evidence of Ruchnius.
But it's not Ruchnius still, it just messed up Gashmis, it's not Ruchnius.
You're right, it's messed up Gashmius, but we see from that another version and so on. But Hanukkah became the final thing. Chazal made Purim and Hanukkah the two critical standard bearers of who we are now. Who are we? We are people who reside in the world of Gashmias, and we sense the world of Ruchnius only as a thought, as a machshava. No more can we visit it. We have no sensory connection. We can't see it anymore. There's no nevuah. We don't see any deviation from physical reality. There are no nisim nigla. You mean? You have to remember, even Avodah Zorah, right? Like Avodah Zorah. Most people think that what was Avodah Zorah? People used to worship stones. People never worship stones. People are not stupid. Nobody worships stones. But what people did was, they were able to set up a certain system where those stones or those idols became symbols of koichas elyonim that correspond to the mazolos. And they can control in certain ways these koichas of ruchnius. But what happened? It disappeared too. Chazal, the sages, Chazal did not get rid of Avodah Zorah. Can't do that. Only the Bonisham could do that. But they knew it was leaving anyway. Chazal knew that they were entering into a different world where the relationship or the interaction between Ruchnis and Gashmias were becoming further and further apart. And they knew that in this new world called Gashmias, okay, there's no koyach of Ruchnias in the usual sense. Chanukah was the epitome of that. What happened in Chanukah? You have to understand what a Jew was like in the time of Chanukah, fundamentally. Okay? You open up the Chumash and you read the Chumash. Fine, those stories. I mean, honestly, if you lived in the time of Chanukah, which is like 170 BCE and so on and so forth in that time, and you read the Torah and so on, that looked like Lord of the Rings. I mean, it looked like some kind of supernatural movie of some sort, or some supernatural story. There were no Nevi'im anymore at that time. The last of the Nevi'im died 300 years before that. You mean? There was no Nisim Nigla, there was nothing. What there was incredible Chokhmah established by Yevanim, the Greeks, who believed in science and technology and philosophy. They believed that what's true is what you can see and what's subject to the senses. You see it. And they believed that man was the greatest of all the creatures on the planet Earth. Therefore man was God. Even their astrology were all in human forms. And so on. So by the time the Jews, Klal Yisrael, got to the Yevonim, they were Hellenists. They fundamentally said, you know something? We don't see any evidence whatsoever of Ruchnius. There's nothing here anymore. Nothing. The whole Chumash is a story that we have nothing to do with. These are nice stories of our past or whatever the story is. That's all they are. You know, nobody lived anymore that saw a Navi or a Nes or anything anymore. So it was an incredible Nesoyim. It was a turning point in the history of Klal Yisrael when the Tigbur Surah between Ruchnis and Gashmias had established such a point when the residence was completely in Gashmias and all forms of Ruchnis took a tremendously lowered, descending order, which you have no shaykhs to anymore. That is a very big Nesoyim. And that was the Nesoyim of Chanukah. You see it. What was the Nesoyim? The Nesoyim wasn't between the Greeks and the Jews. It wasn't the war. That's not the Indian. The Nesoyim was, does the Bonishim exist in this world of Gashmias? Where is he? What is he? You see it. What Ruchnius? You see my point. The real battle of Chanukah is the battle of the Hellenists, the ones who believed in Greek philosophy where man was the supreme being and physicality was the extreme domain. That's really what's going on over here and so on. Ruchnis didn't exist anymore. So the shaila is, how could Klal Yisrael live in a world where there was no evidence of Ruchnis anymore? When the whole Torah is a book that narrates the whole story of Ruchnis. You see what I'm saying? It's like Judaism, if I may say, became completely irrelevant. Outdated, anachronist. It's not nogay anymore. What does that have to do with me? You know, it had the same quality. Like I told, if you read the book Lord of the Rings or one of these supernatural kind of books, it's the same thing. This was the Nisoyan of Klal Yisrael. At that moment, they had to create a new form of Judaism, one where there is no connection anymore to Ruchnis as we know it, in that sense. But it's Kula Gashmis. And in that sense, they had to say, you know something? This is simply a matzav. This is the current state of Ruchnis and Gashmis. That's all. But the Banishim is still there. You know, all of the things that once existed still exist. They don't exist anymore. In that we don't see it. The only change in Judaism was not what exists, right, but what can be seen. They had to realize that everything that was there before is still here now. It is still the Banishim acting in history. The Hashgacha. Everything is still the same. The only difference is you can't see it anymore. You see it. He will not allow you to see it with any real kind of evidence. So they had to blame. So for the first time, they had to be makabel and Eloki, which was what? A Ruchnis, which is completely inaccessible to a human being. And fundamentally, that's really what it was. And that's the story of Chanukah. That's why the Ikones, which they demonstrated, was that they fought against the Greeks. But their fighting against the Greeks wasn't so much a question of liberty. I don't know that the Greeks said, you know, you're going to be slaves. There wasn't a slavery. The Greeks, the Syrian Greeks, did not oppress them and made them slaves. What it said is, forget about your Meshigan and Ruchnias. It doesn't exist anymore. And of course, there were certain oppressivenesses and there were persecutions in that sense. But it was a Ruchnistic of persecution. It wasn't like Haman, where he wanted to destroy the Jews. You see. So what was the big problem over here? You see it. The problem was they realized that they had to recapture Judaism or the Torah in a new definition, in a new malbush that they never had before. And that's what they did. And they fought against the Greeks, even though the Greeks were much greater in number. How could they win? Because they said very simply, if the Torah is emistic and the Banishon exists and functions in a world of total Hester, we can still win. Who wins a war is not totally in Teva. Teva is the Mechusta. Teva is what covers it up, you see. But the Hashgacha can be there for us as much as if we are a fraction of the Greeks as opposed to a larger number. So they were Moisa Nefesh. They knew they could all get killed. But the Mesiras Nefesh to establish the Torah in a different malbush, in a malbush of Haskalah or Chochmah, not in a malbush of Nevuah and Ruchnias, okay, did one instant thing. They won. And this was a ness. I think the ratio was 7-1. I think there were 7 or 8 Greeks to every one Jew in the war. And the Jews won. It's an amazing thing. But the Banisham said, I give you a parting gift. I give you a parting gift. What's my parting gift? Because you are Moisa Nefesh to demonstrate a new Malbish, okay, on the Torah. My parting gift to you is I will let you see one more ness. One more time. It's called, like they say in English, one more time. I will let you see that your Mesiras Nefesh Staka emes. And I'm going to let something in a world, you have to understand something. Nisim was not coming into that time. The time of Chanukah was not a time for Nisim. You know, the Teva, the relationship of Ruchnis and Gashmis was not such that it would cater to a Ness. What, you know, the two did not connect in that way anymore. You see it. And the Banisham said, you're going to have that Ness. And the Ness was in the ore. The concept of the ore, the light, which is the Haskalah, where the Banisham said, I will one more time show you, you see, that what you are Moisa Nefesh is the emes. I am here. I've never left. And suddenly, One candle did for 8 days, which is a complete ness. That's a completely physical ness, and so on. Why don't Chazal mention it in Al-Anisam? Right. Because the ness was really a reward. It wasn't the avodah. You know Chazal are very much keyed up on avodah. Okay, the Mesiras Nefesh of a Yid, the avodah. Okay, so Chazal say that was the ness. You see that you can beat an army that was 7 times bigger than you. That's takashtik ness. Could also be caused by a brilliant military strategies in a sense, but basically it was a ness. So Chazal said that the ness was the Indian of Klal Yisrael and the Mesiras Nefesh. You mean that taka was a ness. The other ness was the taka, a reward. It was a one-time event where the Baruch Shem said, "I will show it to you again. That which you worked for, you will earn, and you will see it again." That's why Chanukah is such shaykhs to us. You see it. And it's tremendous shaykhs to us. Why? Because we live in Chanukah. Chanukah is not something that happened way before our time, in a sense, in a door where Ruchnis and Gashmis had a different interaction. It happens when it's the interaction that exists now. It's all Gashmis. It's Kula Gashmis. See it. So Chanukah is extremely important. When a Yid takes those lights and he lights them, he's saying again the same thing and so on. Why? He's saying, you know something? Hashem Elokim. There is Ruchnius. I can't see it. I don't reside there anymore. I don't live in Ruchnius. You see it? There's no Nevi'im. There's not even Mechavshvin. There's nothing. There's not Avodah Zorah, Mechkishav. All of that fancy stuff. It only exists in the movies probably in some level. It doesn't exist in reality anymore. But you know something? It's still here. These lights tell me it's still here. In that kind of sense and so on. The goddess of Chanukah is an extra reward. Why? Because there would have been a ness, what, if there would have been 2 days for a 1-day flask, right? Or 3 days, right? You got 1 day the oil lasts b'teva, right? So the second day is a ness. The third day is even noch a bigger ness. Why another 7 days? Why another 7 days of the ness and so on? So the mystery of Chanukah is even deeper. What the Baruch Shem said, let me tell you the future. Chanukah, or the nails of Chanukah, is the future. It is. But it's a future that, I mean, I'd have to sit here for days to what future? What do these lights tell us? What do these 7 miraculous lights tell us? Not the 1 day, which was Teva. What do the 7 tell us? Really? What? You know? It tells us that it's like Moshe, that the Baruch Shem said to Moshe Rabbeinu, you know, Solachti kidvarecha, that which you demonstrated will become your reward, but much greater than you even think. What did the Jews do on Chanukah? They established the Olam Muchni in a hestedika fashion in the Olam Gashmi. The ability to see Ruchnius in Gashmius is an ore. It's an ore, it's a haskola. It's a certain ore, the ability to see the true nature of existence, okay, when it's covered up. But what Chanukah shows is something else, that there are 7 different levels of existence. Each level is an ore, it's hasoga, where you suddenly see the nature of existence in hasoga terms. So that first day is teva, it's existence in natural order, where you don't see ruchnis anymore, gashmis. The second day already, you're really looking at the ruchnistic underpinning of teva. The third day is the ruchnistic underpinning of the second day. You see, the fourth day is of the third day. So what's happening is that you're not simply dealing with teva and the ma'ila medecha teva. You're dealing with teva, the ma'ila medecha teva, the ma'ila medecha teva. Lamaila. In other words, what happens is you're looking at all the stages of existence, where each stage becomes a gashmias, and the one behind it becomes its ruchnias. So gradually, what you are is you're sitting there, and your tferes, or your ability to see an eloki, gets deeper and deeper and deeper. So each madreg of awe is a new chiddush, and the Baruch Shem says, and on that 8th day, that's olam haba. You will slowly progress through many levels of consciousness till you get to a madreg of olam haba, which is finally when you're seeing what? You're seeing the whole concept of ruchnius in 7 different levels of existence. It's an incredible haftarah. So in the nearest of Chanukah, because you didn't have to have they had 8 days. But the truth of the matter is, right, I mean, there could have been other things, but it could have been 2. 1 day already shows a ness. 2 days on a 1-day flask is already a ness. You see it. 8 days, because in the end what the Baruch Shem is saying is that there are 7 madregas, you see it, to Ruchnius. Each one being the panemius of the one in front of it, and so on, and a deeper level. And you have to understand what the concept of panemius. Panemius, what does panemius means? Panemius of Chtsoinus. Panemius means is that you're looking at a level of existence which is underneath another level of existence. You see it, which you cannot grasp. You cannot grasp, what does that mean, another level of existence? It's not other entities and other things. It's a malach on level 3 cannot be masig a malach on level 4. It's like he's out of context completely. A malach on level 3 cannot masig on level 4, because a malach on level 3 trying to be masig a malach on level 4 is almost like you trying to be masig a shtick what the Ein Sof is, which is the panemius of you. You see it. And these are the hasogas. And all of these hasogas are based on one fundamental idea and so on. How did I start the shir? I started the shir with what idea? With the idea that Ruchnis and Gasmias are dynamic, they're interactive, and they're constantly changing the way they relate. You don't realize that. To you, well, Ruchnis and Gasmias, it's not true. Throughout history, there have been 3 fundamental changes between the two. Adam Mishin Koidem Achet, when they were merged, Adam Mishin Acha Achet, when they became separated, and suddenly Gashmis becomes a residence. And that's why Misa, death, came involved, because if we reside here, okay, we have to pick ourselves up and move somewhere else completely different. That's called death and so on. Okay, that's the second. But at least that, you could still at least visit Ruchnius with Nevuah and these things. Until finally, there is no Nevuah, there's no Ruchnius. You lived here, you thought here, you slept here, you ate here, you ended. Here was where you are. Tchias HaMesim, okay, represents what? Is when Ruchnius and Gashmias return to the way they related by Adam Koidem Achet. Hashivenu Hashem Elecha v'noshuva Chadesh Yomeinu Kekedem. What does that mean, Chadesh? Is it Kedem? It's here, it's not Chadesh. No, we go back to the Madrega of Ruchnis and Gashmias, Neshama and Guf, as it was by Adam Rishon Koidem Achet. That's Tchias HaMesim. Every Neshama in the Shemayim, as far as I believe in absolute is of Shpilkus, waiting to come back to his Guf. Because when he comes back, he's not coming back to get up again and what? And he's coming back and so on, because it means that Tchias HaMesim doesn't mean that the Neshamas come back to their Guf. That's not what it means. It means that Ruchnius and Gashmias merge again, and so on. So Mamela, there's no death. If you don't reside in a physical world as opposed to a spiritual world, you're not dying anywhere. You're not going anywhere. You're there already. You don't go to a place where you already live. And that's what they're waiting. They're waiting for the two Ilamas to be mishtatef and mischaber in such a way that there is no death, there's no aging, there's no death, there's no disease. All of these machshavas that exist because of the inyan of what? Of rachamim, which is the central instrument of rachamim, is to disengage ruchnis and gashmis in a certain way. So all of these chokhmas, death only comes because gashmis and ruchnis separate. That's where you have Misa. When the Baruch Shem said to Adam Rishon, K'biyom Achalchem, Mois Tumusun, he was telling him the new state of Ruchnis and Gashmias. That's what he was saying. Not that you're going to die. Adam Rishon was talking, what do you mean die? What death? I'm already, what do you mean death? I live in the world, I'm here. Where am I going? So the Baruch Shem said, I will transfigure the two. There will be a new matzav. In this new matzav, you will experience the separation to what we call death, or aging, or whatever the story is. And that's the concept. So Chanukah is a turning point in history. Well, for the first time until the end of human history, which is now, until Tchias HaMesim, Gashmias reigns supreme. Ruchnis exists. You can only feel it a little bit. And that's it. And that's it. And we have to wait till that time when the Mashiach comes, which is what you said before, which is true, but it's not exactly what that means. It's when the Mashiach comes, and especially Mashiach ben Yosef, will restore Wuchtis and Gashmis, to the interaction that they had when it first started. And that's the emistic gula. That's a real gula on an incredible level. And from that point, both Wuchtis and Gashmis eventually go to another stage. It's not called Tchias HaMesim. What is it called? It's called the elimination of the duality of Wuchtis and Gashmis. When the two realities themselves suddenly merge, not like this, but like this, where you can't see the difference. And then finally, both of them disappear. The glasses come off, and then who comes back? You come back. The real you, without the issue of Nam Sufa. And we cannot begin to imagine what that even begins to look like. Okay. What's that?
He was also compromised because he was here by definition.
Koydem Achet, yeah.
He was also compromised.
It was compromised. There were two of them together.
She said in the beginning the people in the film are waiting to come back. Just makes me feel good. So they're in an uncompromised state. Why are they waiting to come back? The compromise is being in the goof.
Because the guf is a lens and the neshama is a lens. They want to get rid of all lenses. They can't do that until the two lenses come together and both disappear.
The goof is the compromise in essence is potential to be higher than I have.
And both neshama and guf both disappear, but they first merge and then they both disappear. That's zichuch al-guf.
How is Chacham Adam Pinyavi?
And the rest of it, it's a Ramchaldige Mahal,
How is Chacham Adam Pinyavi?
A Navi is, even though a Navi is greater than a Chacham because a Navi is connected to Ruchnius.
Right, okay.
But he's weaker than a Chacham because he cannot see the Yichud. He sees his Nevuah is always in Maris, Chazon. He sees it in visions, which sees multiplicity in existence. Whereas a Chacham always sees everything connected. Haskalah sees Yichud. Everything is connected, you know, it sees the yichud of everything. Even though all of you look different, you're all men. Haskalas is miyached, all multiplicities.
But Nabi looking into the world of Ruchnius itself,
But
that's what it is.
through eyes, through gashmis. That's a song.
What's the self-awareness of God?
There's also self-awareness, but the neshama is different. The neshama of a guy does not see, it barely sees the organismic, or he feels. No.
Yeah, the same sense as self.
The child is, what's the olam haba of a guy? There's an olam haba, but you know the best way the best thing I said is like this. I think the way I understood it. Let's say olam haba, for example, is let's say olam haba is a place where you sit and you're looking at, you're watching something, okay? If you look at the eye, when you're looking at something, there are three levels of ocular activity, means the activity of the eye. One, okay, fundamentally, there's the retina. Light comes in on an object, comes into the retina, and it hits about like 100 million retinal cells. Okay, and it produces suddenly, those cells take the light, it's like a photoelectric, and convert them to electricity. The electricity then passes the optic nerve all the way into the brain, and then it goes to a certain part of the brain. So the second level is the optical nerve. It translates all light signals into electrical signals. That's the second re'iyah. You can either see something optically, you see it, and retinally, you see it as a light being, or electrically. Finally, the optic nerve goes to the brain. The brain takes all those electrical impulses, converts that into an image on the mind. It's like on the screen. So what you're really seeing is the mind is saying, this is to represent an image of whatever that is, and so on. So there are three levels of visions, okay? So the point is what I would say, a yid, because a yid, Yisrael af b'shechoti Yisrael, and he gets the highest madrigas of Olam Haba, he sees everything cerebrally. He sees Olam Haba with the brain. That's what it really looks like. That's the brain. That's really where it all comes together. Okay. The goy sees it, okay, retinally. In other words, what a goy sees, it's like, let's say for example, you're watching, you're watching a movie. You're sitting in a movie, a documentary. You're watching, and you're looking at it. That's the best thing. You're looking at the movie. If somebody can't be in the theater, he's in the projection room, so he's looking at the movie by following the tape. You know what I mean? He's looking at the tape in the movie. That's him. That's the movie to him. You know what I mean? So then there's so the guy is the guy who's watching the movie through the tape. I mean, whatever simcha that is, that's it's better than nothing, I guess. As opposed to the person whose mom's watching it, it's popcorn or whatever. So the same thing. A guy is seeing it, but in a different form, in electrical forms.
My question is he also chelik elokayim b'ma?
Yeah.
Meaning that
You can't. If you're an olam haba, you're an Eloki. There's no. You're madrega of Eloki. I mean, not a. You're madrega. You can't get the olam haba is when the Shechina, which is you, becomes a true teferis. It just breaks out completely.
Goyim can be an
What's that?
Goyim can be an
I'm sorry, goyim? Yeah. Well, it depends on the goy. But
If you are a chelik,
the bracha ta'avom avinu was v'nivuchu b'chol kol mishpus v'damar, which means that the Bonichim didn't say that avom, I'm only keeping my bris with you and everyone is going to be kaput. No. He said, I'm making like an older brother, younger brother scheme. You mean? You're simply the older brother, and that's it. The younger brother cannot acquire what you can acquire, because you have tayyag mitzvahs and you have a tanaya guarantee. They can't. But you know something? So you're a landlord, you can build a house, they can rent a room. Renting a room is a madrega no'elam haba. Owning the house is a bigger madrega no'elam haba. But they can rent, which means you can't get them that madrega unless you have some shaykhs to the Ein Sof. It's not possible, because it's the Ein Sof that suddenly becomes the power. I mean, that's you're feeling it. There's no namdik sufa. There's no borders in any disempowering way, and the guy can feel that. But obviously, it's much weaker. It's a different form. I can't explain what form that is. I don't know, but it's a much lower form.
When these two started to separate,
Yeah.
is that why people live much longer, right, by the mission, and it went down very quickly?
In essence, all the differences between the Doros Rishonim were the biggest Doros of all. Because, we don't realize that, the first two parshas in the Torah are the Doros Rishonim. They were the greatest of all the Doros. They were incredible. How do we know? Because the Mabul, they were killed, the Mabul killed them. The Mabul was the Ov Mashiach turned into water. They died from the Ov Mashiach. The Banishim did not kill someone with the Ov Mashiach. They destroyed someone. So they were the biggest. The problem was that there was no guarantee. In other words, they could get Olam Haba, but they can also lose it. And when he came to Avraham, he said, I'm going to give you a guarantee. Your children will make it. They will have a chelik in Olam Haba. They can still lose it a little bit. But fundamentally, with tayyag mitzvahs, they will make Olam Haba. There's a guarantee in that sense.
Do you see anything significant to the fact that today people are starting to live longer again after 5,500 years? It's starting to reverse.
There's a physical concept of biochemistry with telomeres, where they're trying to lengthen the genetic pools where people live long and so on. But again, you understand something. In the end, if you really, it's an eitzah that you really can't follow, but it's an eitzah. If you want to understand the entire Torah, really, not in the B'di'evitika forms, you got to go back and say to the previous form, say what was supposed to happen. What was really supposed to happen? With all these b'di'evids, what was really supposed to happen? And you have to say to yourself, what was the madrega of vuchtis and gashmis at that point in time? Because it's the madrega of vucht. See, you might say, what do you mean madrega of vucht? It's vucht and gashmis. It's not. There's a whole different minanushi, mankind, if vucht and gashmis are like this, as opposed to like this. This allows misa. Because since Ruch and Gashmis are separate, you can only live in one and not the other. That's called death. So you stayed one, you died, then you moved to the other. There's a movement. But there's no death in this one. Other mission was never supposed to die. So the concept of death and aging all have to do with the concept of what? Of Vihaltman. What is the relationship of Ruchtis and Gashmis? You understand what I'm saying? Because that's the mechanism. Those are the two lenses that a person has to choose and so on. And there's a relationship between those lenses, the way they interact and so on. But that's the machine. the dynamic or the machine of all of history is the movement of Ruchnis and Gashmis. And the Ramchal, he says it, he doesn't say precisely this, but you can see, he calls it Tikboyer Sarah, the ascendancy of evil. What do I mean ascendancy of evil? It doesn't mean that people are becoming more and more Rishoyim. I mean, in a certain sense, they were more Rishoyim back then and so on. What it means is that Ruchnis, that our ability to connect to Ruchnis it disappeared. It's still there, we're still having the Neshama, but the Neshama only now is there, like little blips on a radar screen, you know what I mean? Like, don't do this, don't do this, you know what I mean? But nobody gets up in the morning saying, something, where's the Bonasham? I have to connect to the Bonasham today. Man, what is that? You know what I mean? Yeah, people say, I want to go to yeshiva today, I'm going to listen to a shir, but nobody nobody has a cheshik for the Bonasham or such.
The word back in the day, Rabbi Akiva, reached this non-Shabbat, that was after.
But they were much closer.
Right?
Yeah. The only thing, what Rabbi Akiva once said that Nevuah used to be the dividing line. You see it. But Rabbi Akiva said in Savei B'Chiddush is that the dividing line was extended to Ruach HaKodesh. When we said over there that we still have Ruach HaKodesh, what does that mean? It means that it's no longer Nevuah. Nevuah dropped to a low level of slight visitation. It's like...
He was able to reach high Madrigas than Moshe Rabbeinu, right?
Who?
Rabbi Akiva.
Because of his Haskalah. It was the
Chachma wasn't.
Chachma, Rabbi Akiva ben Yosef was the greatest living person in Haskalah. He was Zoyka to the old Mashiach. Mamash. He was the only human that ever made that. The 50th gate. No, right. Gashmis. Yeah, but the Chachma is beyond Gashmis and Ruchnis. Haskalah. It's a midah. Even Moshe Rabbeinu, Moshe was the greatest Navi of all. Yet Moshe Rabbeinu wanted the Luchas. Why do he want it? The Nun Sharebina. That's Haskalah. The Nun is Haskalah. You know what I mean? Why? Because in the end, Chacham Adolf ben Navi, the greatest ability to be Mareh, to understand your yichud with the Bonasham and all of this comes to Haskalah. The Mashiach in a Yaskal Avdi. The galus of the Mashiach as he gets out of his klippets is to Haskalah. The Mashiach does not grow in Nevuah in that real sense and so on. It's Haskalah, and as a maskal, he's much greater than Moshe Rabbeinu. He's greater than Avram, Moshe, all of them, even the Malach HaShoras. And it's Haskalah in the end, with like the Bonasham says, Im Teshalal bezois Teshalal. Haskel v'yodei oisi, which is Chochmah, because in Chochmah you see the yichud of everything. It allows you to understand everything and so on. One thing I say, which is also a thing, Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, we have on Lag BaOmer, we have the whole Hilul of Rabbi Shimon and so on. What was the goddess of Rabbi Shimon? What was the goddess? What is the big deal of Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai? I mean, it's a Tana, but what's the whole thing and so on? That Rabbi Shimon restored the Kabbalah in a certain sense. And that's completely untrue. He did not restore the Kabbalah. What he did was, he took it away from us. Because Rabbi Akiva ben Yosef, because he was Mashiach and he reached the 50th gate, he had the whole Kabbalah not in the form of a mashal, it was the form of a nimshal. He understood it all, you know what I mean? There was no mishalim, you know what I mean? The Kabbalah or the deepest secrets of Hashkafa were not hidden in metaphors and symbols. He understood this. But when his Talmidim died, and it's a very big chiddush of Rabbi Akiva, he had 24,000 students who died. And then after they died, he had 5 students. And these 5 students, Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Shimon, and so these 5 students, from them came the whole Kol HaTorah that we know. What was the difference between the 5 students and the 24,000 before? The 24,000 students were Talmidim of a Mashiach. The 5 students were Talmidim of Rabbi Akiva ben Yosef, much lower Madrega. Why? Because Rabbi Akiva realized that it's not going to happen, so he had to save the 50th gate. He didn't bring it back up like Moshe. He kept the luchas. Rabbi Akiva kept the nun. He kept it down here, but he put it in the form of a mashal, symbols, metaphor, so that nobody understands it. And he said to Rabbi Shimon, I want you to take this whole nun and put it in a form where no one could understand it anymore. However it is on. So nobody understands Kabbalah anymore, really, in terms of what it's really saying. You understand what I'm saying? And this is Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon was master the nun, so that we still have it, but in a form that we don't understand it anymore. So he saved it in a way. He saved it because it was decreed that there would be 2,000 years of the Golus of Rome, Edom. But in that Golus, the nun had to be in a martial form, like the Zohar, Kisvi Ari. It was only the Ramchal that was finally given permission to open it up. You know, Ramchal is the first one that was given permission to begin to return it back to the Nimshal. You know what I mean? Because it's close to the Geula. You know what I mean? And so on. And even he kept it. You ever look at the Ramchal Sefer? Very hard to understand the Ramchal. You know what I mean? You know, it's very hard, not even something. Because he was Megala Tefach, Mechas Tefchaim. You know, he revealed certain things, but a lot of, you know, they say the whole thing and so on. But in the end, the Galus of the Mashiach is the complete presentation of Kabbalah in a total form of Hashkafa, where it's completely understood by everyone. So what everyone will understand, the biggest Chachamim did not understand before, because it'll be open. You see what I'm saying? And that's the thing. I mean, I get that Yotzat here 2 years ago on that, the 50th gate, the progress of the 50th gate, but that's a whole different thing.
How do you see the
You
idea
understand what
of...
I'm saying? So, you know, you see, and all of this is Ruchnis and Gashmis. You know, it's like a car and the engine. What runs a car? The engine. In the end, the ability of a car to perform, the way it performs, depends on the dynamics of the engine. How many pistons there are, I mean, all the stuff there. I mean, the engine of Olam Hazeh is Ruchnis and Gashmis in their interactions. That runs, that determines Neshamas and Esterim and Oiris. Everything is determined, you know, by the interaction of Ruchnis and Gashmis. You see what I'm saying? And the tremendous chiddush is that in other missions before the chiddush, Ruchnis were not Olamas. They were not Olam. They were lenses, really. It was one man who could see, feel, sense two different ways of looking at himself and the Bnei Shem. He was able to look at his border in two ways. Either the Bnei Shem is a napni outside of me, and therefore I'm outside of him, Yeshod Mavadoi, or he is me, except that I feel a border, but he's me, Einoid Mavadoi, you know what I mean? And that's Ruchnis and Gashmis, you see what I'm saying?
So what role does Gashmis play in Olam Haba? Why do you need Gashmis back? Why don't you just get rid of Gashmis?
You don't need Gashmis, you don't need Ruchnis, you don't need anything. There's both of these are lenses. Why do I have to look at eyeglasses if I can see with my own eyes?
What do they say?
Because in the end, there's no such...
What do they say? Neshama is nitzchis.
No. And the real answer to that, there is no such thing as reality. At all. Reality was... What is reality? Reality means that there's a certain aspect of existence which is outside of me. Right? This cup is reality. You know what I mean? It exists and it doesn't exist. As far as myself is concerned, there is nothing. The only thing that the Bnei Shem ever made, and I'll tell you a fascinating concept, there's only one thing that God ever made, and that's it. That's it. The only thing the Bnei Shem ever made was an Ein Sof, and then a Zolosai, which is a Simsim, and that's it. There is nothing else. Everything else comes from the Zolosai. The Bnei Shem took Nam Sufa and extended it out, and that became the two lenses. The duality of Nam Sufa came out as a reality, Ruchnis and Gashmis and so on. Everything comes out of the Zolosai, Yetzor and Yetzor. It all comes out of Nam Sufa. It comes out of him and becomes a reality. He has got to choose the reality, and once he makes the choice, that reality becomes him, and then everything goes back. And all that's left is the self, and that's Olam Haba. So it's not an issue of Guf and Neshama. Neither one of them is you. They both exist in some way to present different emissaries to you. You need to choose what it is.
There's different levels of neshama. There's one called Yechida, the Svarim say. Could that be the self? The Yechida and the neshama? That's the highest level of the neshama. Very hard to get to. Mashiach's only going to get it at the end. But that's not the self either?
No. The self is a symptom of the Ein Sof. The Yechida is a neshama, but it's a neshama at the level of, it's a neshama at the level, or the Shechina at the level where you completely connect to the Ein Sof in you, and you don't feel like it's outside of you, or it's different. There's no division between you and your own Ein Sof. You feel a border, but you don't sense a division at all. And that's the Shechina in the Nun, in the highest Madrega of Tiferes. You see what I'm saying? And the Yechida, that would be the Yechida.
How does it speak in the morning in the brachas? Elokai, neshama shenasata bi.
Well, there you got it. Neshama shenasata bi.
So why Elokai?
Who's the bi and who's the neshama?
Who's Elokai?
Elokai, well, Elokai, as far as we're concerned, is the Ein Sof.
That's in me.
Right. Well, no. It's the Ein Sof by himself before Tzimtzum, who was with Samson himself, and then put a neshama into me, which is a lens. Tahority. You have to be careful not to destroy the lens. You have to look through it and not destroy it. But that itself says that the neshama and the B is you. B, that's self. The neshama is simply a lens.
All the svarim that say that the neshama is a chelik lekami mal, all arguing on you.
Also, it's nitzchi.
The neshama is a chelik. Tanya, the beginning, the first parak, the neshama is a chelik lekami mal.
Where it all starts, if anyone knows, where does it start? What was the first? What was the first product of Tzimtzum? What's the first product of Tzimtzum?
After the inside.
Right after the Tzimtzum.
The Bria.
Who?
The Bria, no?
What?
The Bria. The Bria was.
Who the Kabbalah said?
Adam Kavna?
Who?
Adam Kavna?
No.
It's a bubble.
Come on, hey.
I don't know these things, you know that.
The Rishimu.
I know
What is the Rishimu? What does the word Roshim mean? A trace, a she'eris. The Rishimu is a trace of who? Right. That's the Zolosai.
That's the first of us.
Yeah. Nobody talks about the Rishimu, and that's a tremendous mistake. The Rishimu is you.
I never knew what it meant. I saw
Yeah. The Rishimu is you. The Chiddush is not the Rishimu. Tzimtzum, what Tzimtzum did was create a Rishimu by creating a circle so that the Rishimu was in there, separating the Rishimu from the Ein Sof. It's the circle which is the incredible thing of the Tzimtzum. It separated. What the Bnei Shem did was, Ein Sof did not separate himself from the Rishimu. The Ein Sof created a separation through a border. So the Rishimu is the new version of the Ein Sof.
In a border?
In a border. Exactly. But in that form, that's you.
That's way before. Wow.
No, it's not way. No. You know,
One time or a billion times?
Let me nimshalize some of the. Let me say with the way the Rishimu is the Zulosai. It's the Ein Sof in a border. Mamash. What happened? In that form, the Rishimu feels Nam Niksufa. It's the beginning of Din. Din means it senses Nam Niksufa. So the Ein Sof says to the Rishimu, you gotta get rid of it. You can have a Shlemis Tikoy Lamabo. So what does it do? What does it do? What does the Ein Sof do to the Rishimu? What's the next step?
Put an hour into the regime.
A kav. It suddenly puts an ore from the Ein Sof, not the Rishimu, an ore from the Ein Sof, that suddenly takes the Rishimu and from the Rishimu brings out 10 spheres, which is Adam Kadmon. What are these 10 spheres? What are they? A sphere is nothing more than a capacity to masakin oneself. That's all it is. A sphere is an energy, a certain type of energy, which allows you to masakin your Nam Niksufa. And there were 10 of them, representing Din and Lachamim, and so in different stages. So therefore, the Adam Kadmon is the Rishimu in the form capable of having a tikkun. The Rishimu is in a form where there's no tikkun possible. It just has Nam Niksufa. Therefore, we say that the Rishimu is the first product of a hanukkah called Chesed. You know, the Baruch makes a Rishimu, right? Once the Rishimu has a problem of border, which is the circle, you know, the cholotz is that, then suddenly the Ein Sof says, we got to get you fixed. So I have to put you in a form where you become capable of tikkun. So it changes the Rishimu into a form called 10 spheres. The 10 spheres is the Rishimu in what's called a tikkun form. And then starts the thing.
Capable of tikkun, not a tikkun form.
Capable of it. It's now vulnerable to divine. And that's right. That's what the thing is. The world never goes back, even in Zichot, the world never goes back to the Rishimu. Why? We go back to Adam Kadmon. Olam Haba is considered to be Adam Kadmon. What it is, it's the form of the Rishimu in the form of Tikkun. Why does it go back to that? Why don't we go back to the form of Rishimu? Because we are defined by our Tikkun. So in the end, whatever Rishimu you are, is what you've established through the 10 spheres. So the 10 spheres, which are energies that allow you to masakin yourself, become like a badge. You see it. Your 10 spheres is like a badge that says, this is the madreg of your tikkun. This is the madreg of your tikkun. So everyone has a badge composed of 10 spheres that identify where you're holding in terms of the tikkun of Namik Sufa. And that's your own Olam Haba.
So what does it mean that the spheres are mashpia the whole world? They create everything. Everything creates. The Ramchal says that the neshama and the guf, everything comes out of the spheres. That's why it's tzelem elokim, right? It was created before the spheres. The spheres didn't create anything.
No, they didn't. The spheres are tikkunim. They're energies that allow tikkunim to take place. That's what they are. And that's why they don't exist right away. What it does exist right away is the Rishimu, which is the Zulasa. The Zulasa is an answer for the border. It's exactly what it is. You see it.
Did the spheres change the Rishuma and create a new being? Because the Ramchal says that the spheres created.
They create what?
The person resembles the spheres.
Yeah,
right?
because what happens is you go into a tikkun form. You go into a form of tikkun. Now you come, tikkun of what? What does it have to be masakin? Namlik sufa. That's what you have to be masakin. And in the form of 10 spheres, you are capable of doing that. So you have to say something very important, John. Where does free will come from? Where does free will come from? What does that mean you have free will? What is that? Where does it come from? You understand what I'm saying? The Banishim didn't give you free will as such. Your free will means that there's something in you that's beyond everything. There is nothing that controls you, which means that there's something in you that is beyond all reality. It exists, that its existence transcends all reality. There's nothing outside of you. Therefore, you're free. If there's something outside of you that can influence you, you're not free. Free will means that there's something about the way you exist that cannot be controlled or dealt with. Where does it come from? From you. It comes directly from the inner core of who you are. It doesn't come from the outside. It cannot be controlled from the outside. What in you cannot be controlled by the outside? Well, there is no outside. It's the Ein Sof. The gift of free will comes from the fact that the Ein Sof is in you. And you're free. You see, the border, however, subscribes to free will. So at any moment in time, anything, you are always a combination of free will, Ein Sof, and reality or border called Chelek. Namlik Suf is a result of the stira between Chelek and Elokah. That's the problem. And so,
And how do the spheres rectify?
the spheres are simply it's a certain surah that in that surah you can modify, you can exhibit free will and change how you relate to the outside, to the Banishon.
How can you change from where you started? You have certain ingredients you get started, you're created with. How did that change?
You have to understand what free will is. You're right. Normally, when you say something has a certain nature, nature means you can't change it, right? It's your nature.
Right.
Your nature means there's something in reality that your essence is your reality which dominates you. Free will means you don't have a nature. You don't have a nature. What your nature is up to you. Well, wait a minute, how could you make your own nature? That's the Ein Sofi part of you.
So the highest status one can ever attain is a relationship with Ein Sof? Not
Yeah.
a relationship with the Eibishter?
The Eibusha is behind the Ein Sofi.
That one will never be able, he doesn't want to ever.
Who are we davening
Well, first of
to?
all, don't get sad.
Well, I mean, Moshe saw the Eibishter
That's
upon no?
You understand that? You cannot see, know, or have any connection whatsoever with Atzmusai, with the Banishim as he is. Because he's not only beyond the border, he's even beyond not border, no border. He's beyond any concept of any of that. So you can understand the Ein Sof if you could. Fast you can understand Atzmusai. But he's there, he's the show, he's the one. So the Ein Sof is an instrument in his hand. Whether the Ein Sof itself is some other kind of being or whatever, but he's an instrument. Why does he create an Ein Sof? To get to you? Why? Because first he has to make something without a border and then make something with a border. Atzmusai has nothing to do even without border. It's beyond anything and so on. So the Rebbeinu Shalom himself cannot make you. The Rebbeinu Shalom, he cannot mitzamtzim himself, give himself a border, because he's beyond even the absence of a border. The notions of a border, the presence or the absence, has to do with border. Atzmus has nothing to do with border in any case. So he creates an Ein Sof, which is the absence of a border, and then the Ein Sof makes something with the presence of a border. So we can relate to the Ein Sof. But in the end, who do you think you daven to? Do you daven to the Ein Sof, or do you daven to Atzmusai? Who? Atzmusai. Yeah, your relationship was B'Banasham. Except that it's beyond any type of comprehension. So, the only thing you can comprehend, in any sense, is the Ein Sof as an absence of border, but in the end, the only thing you comprehend is the Ein Sof in you. And that's the one you relate to. When you understand your own godless and the yichud of you, you have a beginning of an anik of the yichud of Ein Sof, and so. But you understand. But these things. But as such, we cannot comprehend Ein Sof. Surely cannot atzmusai. But your tefillas are atzmusai, because atzmusai is the being. That's God. Is atzmusai. Do you understand what I'm saying? He's the director, but that director cannot, it's like, it's like, for example, the fish in the ocean. The fish in the ocean, right, cannot comprehend something which is outside of the water. What does that mean, outside of the water? This is where it is. All the action is taking place in the water. What action? What are you talking about outside of water? There's no concept of something outside of water. You know what I mean? Yet, the one who is outside of the water, let's say he's the one that's running everything in the water. So you know that there's something outside the water which is incomprehensible. You're relating to that, but not through an understanding. But you just know that it's there, and that's who you relate to. But you only relate to him to whatever vestige is in you. You see what I'm saying? It's a limitation. But not direct, it's an indirect limitation. But in the end, the one who you mispalel to is Atzmusai. He's the engineer, he's the mechanic, he's the manufacturer, he's the boss.
Musa is both getting together, Yosef and Ein Sof at once, being Miyach.
Who?
That Musa is both getting together, being Miyach and Yosef and Ein Sof. But that's the most you can get to. Saying that he's Gvul and not Gvul.
Who? No, the Ein Sof has no Gvul. You're a Yesof, you have a Gvul. Atzmus is neither. There's nothing neither. It's absolutely incomprehensible.
Beyond existence.
I could play with this a little bit, but this is,
If you're saying that he's Gvul and not Gvul at once, that's the biggest you could.
Who's Gvul?
It's bigger than that.
That's you, that's not Musa, that's you.
So what's this way?
You're a Gvul and not Gvul at the same time. You're a hybrid. And the hybrid is the problem of Namdik Sufa. It is. Because you're both. It's a stira. How could you be free and have nothing outside of you and have a border where you sense there's something outside of you? Make up your mind. Nishtahi, nishtaher. You mean? You understand?
But the concept of essence and existence, the way you started back all those years.
Yeah.
So that's what? That is, when you put into the words essence
That's
and
the world
existence.
of din. That's multiplicity. Like we exist. We exist, and we have an essence, a definition, and we also exist. But the two are separated. In the self, they're not separated. They're the same. But
But that doesn't come into this concept of a gvul versus not gvul?
No. That's a double gvul. Essence and existence is an aggravation of gvul. That's in the world of din, which is our world of kashmis and ruchnius. But again, that's a.
That's post. That's in today's present existence. That's what you mean.
There's 3 levels of existence that we see: chesed, din, rachman. Each one is a different level of existence, totally different from the one thing. You understand? Olam haba is a level of existence that corresponds to the mitzvah chesed. In order to solve Namdik Sufa, which appears in the world of chesed, right? The Baruch Hashem created din. But to see to it that din doesn't destroy you, he also created Rahman. But in each new creation, each hanukkah changes the way existence is. Totally.
And essence and existence comes in where?
What's that?
The concept of essence and existence.
Comes in the world of din.
That's only in the world of din.
Only in the world of din.
Ein Sof is before existence?
Ein Sof is, it's before the world of chesed. It's before the existence of us, the Yesef. Us, yourselves. Yeah. I know this. It's not. This is like very chedushim. It's not its own. But that, if you look and see the
Fire
Torah.
before the inside?
What's that?
Fire?
In essence, Torah is the machshava of Atzmusai, if it were in machshava form. But it's not. But the Torah is the way the Ein Sof talks to us. The Ein Sof. You know what I mean? The way the Ein Sof talks to us in what's called Torah. But not in one that we see. In Torah, the concept, the musagim. The musagim of Torah is the hasagas of the Ein Sof. If we can say that, we really can. I mean, it's all.
If Alam Haba is static, then what does Paul speak about when he speaks about this not a lawyer? That is difference between the Shvi, the Shvi, she, you're constantly going on.